Yeah, Namaste everyone. Today is Natural Cooling Group 39th webinar, and the topic today is Introduction to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, about 15th chapter, and elaborated discussion on it. And this is series 2. Last week we had the same discussion on the same topic by Dr. Vikram, and today we'll be having another series, another session today. And Dr. Vikram, over to you.
All right, thank you, Sudhir, for hosting me again. Let's mute everybody. I'm going to mute all. And I'm still the co-host, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So last week we talked about the 15th chapter of Gita. We started doing the verses and we were able to go only as far as 5 verses. So somehow, this chapter is a bit technical. It's a bit difficult. It's not really as simple as many other chapters. So some people called me and they said, what is this nature of the world? We are not really able to understand this. So you see, in our scriptures, or even as we are growing up, we are told a number of stories. And those stories are told because we have to learn some lessons from those stories. So there is a moral of the story, or in Sanskrit it is called Tatparya Nirnay. So what is the Tatparya, or what is the purpose of telling this story? So now the next full moon day is supposed to be dedicated to Savitri, Vata Savitri they call it. Okay, so this Vata Savitri or Savitri used to be a lady in love with her husband called Satyavan. And by God's grace, this Satyavan fellow died. All right, so Savitri was of course in love with him, and she does not want him to die. She does not want him to be taken away by Lord Yamaraja or the Lord of Death. So she does a lot of tapasya and sadhana and all that. And she fights with Yamaraja, the Lord of Death. All right. And then there is a debate and all kinds of things. And ultimately, she is so persistent that Yamaraja says, or the Lord of Death, okay, that's fine. I've lost to you, or I bow down to your piousness or your dedication to your husband. And here it is, I let him go. So he let him go. All right. So what is the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, if you are a dedicated wife, if you love your husband, and if you are a pativrata, they call it in Sanskrit, then you can even defeat death. All right. So that is the moral of the story. Even Yamaraj cannot do anything to your husband. That is the story. So this is the tatparya, right? This is why the story is told. Now in WhatsApp, we get all kinds of gyan, right? So people will say, what do you learn from this story? You learn that you can escape death, but you cannot escape your wife. Is that the tatparya? So it depends upon what our mindset is, how we are going to take a story, how we are going to learn from a story, and what it means to us. So I've told you the whole story about the world. Now, if you look at any story only in piecemeal, so if you study only the first 2 verses of the 15th chapter, what will you understand? You will understand that this world is an upside down tree. Urdhva moolam adhashakam. So the roots are above and branches are below. Have you ever seen a tree like this doing Shirshasana? So is the tatparya, or is the moral of the story to tell you that there is a tree which is doing a Shirshasana? Or is the moral of the story something else? So the thing is, we have to understand what the moral of the story is. All right. The moral of the story of telling this, the world is upside down, is to explain to us that this world does not appear the way it is. Okay. So the first verse is Udva Moolam Adhashakham Ashwatham Prahuravyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Vedasa Vedavit. Then it also describes it further. Adhascha urdhvam prasutastasya shakha guna pravruddha vishaya pravalaha adhascha mulan yanusantatani karmanu bandhini manushaloke. You see, until we understand all of these verses as our own story, these verses don't really make any sense to us. Any knowledge has to be understood within us. Any knowledge has to be imbibed. It has to be internalized. Only then it will mean something to you. Okay. Otherwise, all this knowledge remains stories, all kinds of stories. And those stories are totally confusing. Can you defeat Yamaraja? Can you defeat the Lord of Death? Can you bring anybody back from the dead? All these questions, if you keep asking yourself, then you will get lost in the details of the story. So let me tell you another story our Swamiji keeps telling all the time. This is about Kupa Manduka, which means the frog in the well. So there used to be a frog in the well. Then in this well, one fish from the sea came one time. All right. So then there was a frog this frog in the well asked the fish. He was like all of us. Whenever you see somebody new, you will ask them their Janma Kundali. Where are you from? Where were you born? Why were you born? When are you going to die? No. See, anyway, we ask all kinds of questions. So this frog also asks these questions. So the sea fish says, I came from the sea. So the frog asks, what is a sea? The fish says the sea is water. So the frog asks the fish, how much water? So he shows with his small hands, with 2 fingers, is it this much? So the fish says no, but he cannot say no, he cannot talk. He has to only wag his tail. So he wags his tail and he says no. Then the frog is surprised. He says, how much water? So he says, then both his hands he spreads as if he's going to give the fish an embrace. He says, this much water? So the fish says no. Then the frog is even more surprised. So then the frog jumps from one place to another. He says, this much? The fish says, no, more than that. Then the frog leaps from one end of the well to another end of the well. He says, is it this much at least? He says, no, more than that. So then the frog says, how much is it? So the fish says, okay, I cannot explain to you. Let's just go to the sea and then we find out. So both of them go to the sea. And then when the frog goes into the sea, then what happens? Then the frog becomes very silent. So what is the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, if we are in a limited understanding or limited consciousness, we cannot understand the infinite. That is the moral of the story. Now, if you get stuck in the story, then you will ask the question, but how did the fish go from the sea to the well? So then what can be the answer? By Kingfisher Airlines, right? So is that the purpose of telling the story? So once we understand why stories are told, once we internalize the message, then we understand, okay, why this story is being told. So therefore, the story of this world is told in these first 2 verses. And then the teacher says, whatever I have told you is all bogus. Narupamasyeha tathopalabhyate nanto na chadir nacha sampratishtha. It has got no beginning, no end. It has got no rupa, means no shape, no upalabhyata. All right. It has got no sampratishtha. It doesn't have any foundation. You cannot really see this world in this manner. It is not like this at all. So then what? Ashwathamenam suvirudha moolam asanga shastrena drudhena chitva. So this world, which is Ashwatham enam, just like it is changing every moment. Ashwatham means, as I explained to you last time, it is tomorrow it won't exist the way it is existing right now. That is called Ashwatha. So Ashwatthamanam Suviruda Moolam, but its roots are so entrenched in our mind that we have to cut them with great dispassion and very hard. So Asanga Shastrena means with the weapon of dispassion, with the weapon of non-attachment, we have to firmly get rid of it. We have to get rid of something only if it exists, right? If we understand that it does not exist, then it will drop. You know, there is no tree, there is no weapon, and there is no cutting because it doesn't exist. It's all in our mind, isn't it? So I've explained this in the previous webinars also, that the world appears to be outside, but it does not get experienced, or we do not experience it unless our sense organs are open, they are on, and the world is creating an impression in our mind, or we are letting the impression of the world being created in our mind. So for example, I'm talking to you from Pennsylvania, but you are hearing my voice within you. All right, so if your ears are not on, or if your mind is not on, or if you are thinking about something else right now, then whatever I'm telling you will not make any sense to you, even though I'm speaking, right? So the experience of the world, even though the world appears to be outside, the experience happens within us. So we also explained in one of the previous webinars, is the world real and the impression it is creating within our mind the image, or is the impression that is created in our mind real and the world is an image of our mind? We don't know. Answer is they are both interdependent. Just like we saw that the sunrise and the east direction are interdependent. So the east depends upon the direction from which the sun rises, and the sun rises from the east. So this is a circular argument. One is dependent on the other, and the truth is the sun really doesn't rise at all. The earth only rotates around itself and sunrise appears to happen. That is what our impression and our experience is. So in the same manner, the experience of the world in our mind is only relative. So relativity is not permanent, isn't it? That is why it is explained in all these three verses that the world as we think of it is not really the way it is. It is something totally different. Therefore, we have to destroy it with the weapon of non-attachment. All right, so once we do that, tatah padam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuyaha tameva chadyam purusham prapadde yata pravrutti prasruta purani. So then that goal should be sought. Tatah padam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuyaha. So once you get rid of this world or get rid of this attachment to the world, the false attachment to the world, then you will reach a place from where you don't come back. So when you understand who you really are, when you get even a glimpse of who you are, you will not come back into the world of attachment. So you will enjoy the world, you will stay in the world, you will live in the world, you will do whatever you need to do in the world, but you will not be attached to it because you will have understood that this world, the way it appears, is not real. Okay. Then in the fifth verse, he says, how do we actually get there? This is the actual sadhana. See, even if we focus on these 5 verses and make sure that we practice these 5 things in our life every day, every moment, the attachment to the world will disappear. It has to. So the sadhana is nirmana moha, not attaching to the measurement. Jitasanga dosha, win over the error of sanga or attachment. Adhyatma nitya, which means focus on the self all the time. Nitya means continuously, all the time. Adhyatma means our own true self. Vinivrutta kamaha, getting rid of all desires. See, because when we focus on ourselves, we realize that our self is totally complete. It is not incomplete. When we realize it is not incomplete, then we don't desire anything else to make it more complete. See, the reason we desire things is because we've assumed ourselves to be incomplete. That is why we desire things, to make ourselves more complete. So vinivritta kamaha, and then dvandvair vimuktaha sukha dukkha samnyahi. Dvandvair vimuktaha means getting rid of dvandva or dvaita. So when we do anything in the world, only two things can happen. Whether either we will win or we will lose. So if we win, then we are happy, and if we lose, then we are unhappy, isn't it? Because if we win, there is profit, and if we lose, there is loss. So Krishna says very clearly, even in the second chapter, that sukha dukkhe samay krutva labha labho jaya jayo. Sukha dukkhe samay krutva labha labho jaya jayo. Which means jaya jayo means win or loss. Labh alabh means profit or loss. And sukha dukkha means happiness and misery. So all of these things are connected. See, these things will happen only if we are chasing something, thinking that that thing or that person or that situation is going to make me happy. Things or people or situations do not make us happy. What makes us happy is not having any desire within ourselves. That is our true nature. See, our true nature is not to have any desire. That is why what happens is, when we fulfill a desire, or when we try to fulfill a desire, the desire for that particular thing or person or object or situation goes away. Then for some time, our mind is desireless. So that desireless mind is basically our own essential nature. So we get a glimpse of it, but we think that to reach that stage or state of mind, we have to fulfill our desire. The trouble is, desires are never really truly fulfilled. So one desire is fulfilled, second desire comes up, second desire is fulfilled, then third desire comes up. How many desires have we tried to fulfill in our life so far? We have tried to fulfill all kinds of desires. And unfortunately, our desires have not ended. So what is the way to get over this problem? The way to get over this problem is to understand that fulfillment of desires is not the way to become happy. The way to become truly happy, permanently happy, is not to have any desires at all. What does that mean? If you are hungry, should you not eat? No. If you are hungry, you should eat. Whatever your needs are, to fulfill those needs, if you have to do any work, if you have to go get a job, if you have to go do a business, to make sure your bills are paid, everybody has enough to eat, you have a proper house to live, all of these things are necessities. To pursue that, absolutely you have to do the work, and those desires are not binding. But when we have desires beyond these things, only for self-gratification, then those desires are binding. All right. So we came up to Nirmana Moha, Jitasanga Dosha, Adhyatma Nitya, Vinivritta Kamaha, Dvandvair Vimuktaha, Sukha Dukkha Samnyahi. All right. So let me see if we have Sister Tanuja here. Can you please raise your hand? Sister Tanuja or Brother Gangadhar, are they here? If you can raise your hand, would be great. We want to unmute you, because
They don't have a mic connection, I think. I can see
Tanuja and Gangadhar's children were going to recite the verses for us today. All right, if they come back and if they raise their hands, then you can unmute them and then they can recite the verses.
Okay.
Until then, we will try to go to the next verse. All right. So we learned, you see, even up to here, it is like our own evolution. So initially, when we are born, we are very attached to our body, right? We are in body consciousness. We think that this body is us, this body is ours, we are within the body and outside is the world. That is the understanding. That is how we grow up, is it not? So when we are in this state of mind, all these verses we have learned so far, they are applicable. All right. So our sense of identity, our sense of me as an individual versus the world as other than me, that has not gone away so far. When we are in that state of mind or in that consciousness, we have to do this sadhana. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama. So this is all, see, the Vedas, the Gita, or even the 15th chapter, their structure mirrors our own evolution. All right, I told this story about evolution to somebody else on the phone, but let me repeat this on our webinar here for the benefit of everybody who's listening. See, evolution, how we have learned evolution. We have learned that initially life was within water, then it became amphibian, then it became terrestrial, then it showed qualities of animal and man, then slowly it evolved into a little man, then he became an angry young man, then he became a Maryada Purushottam Ram, and eventually he became Krishna. That is the story of evolution, is it not? So how are these avatars experienced by all of us within our own life? Initially for 9 months, this jiva is swimming inside the mother's womb. So he is a Matsya at that time. Then as he starts coming out, he becomes Kurma, means he can, he is now transitioning from water into the land, right? So during that time, the jiva is totally dependent on the mother, and it will drink the mother's milk and it will lie down on its back. It will not even come out on his stomach, right? So at that time, the consciousness is mainly body, means hunger and sleep, right? So the child will cry when he is sleepy, he will cry when he is hungry, and the mother knows when to feed the child and when to put the child to bed. All right, so we are in the total animal consciousness. So we are like a Varaha. Then we become slightly aware of our surroundings. Then we become half animal and half man, right? So this is when the Narasimha characteristics are exhibited in our own life. So this is our own evolution taking place, and I'm telling you the whole story of Puranas as it is experienced by us. If we understand it in this manner, then gradually we start walking and we are a little man. So Vaman Avatar, right? So there we are fully human, but we haven't completely understood who we are. Okay, so then after that, when we come into our teenage, then we become angry young men, just like Parashurama. This whole world is out there to kill me, and I'm going to kill the world before it kills me, right? So then I pick up an axe, Parashu, and I start making this whole land Nikshatriya. So all of the Kshatriyas I'm going to kill, right? But guess what? I have picked up a Shastra in my own hand. So even though I was born in a Brahmin family, if I pick up a Shastra, does that not make me Kshatriya? So who should I start the killing with? Should I kill all the Kshatriyas on the planet, or should I kill myself first? So anyhow, we become Parashurama. Then as we grow further, we become Rama, because we get married, and then we have a wife, and then we have to conduct our life. So we come into that state of experience. And then once we have experienced life, householder life in all its glory as well as all its challenges, then we start understanding that there is something beyond this. And then we start our study of the scriptures, and we try to start understanding who Krishna is. That is our own evolution. All right. So all these avatars are not in the Puranas, they are all within us. When we understand these scriptures in this manner, then they start making sense to us. So the moral of the story of all of these Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, Itihasas, all of this is to understand who we are. We are going to learn in the 15th verse of this 15th chapter that the purpose of all the Vedas is basically to understand and to know who we are. That is the purpose of life. Unless we know ourselves, we are not fulfilled. As long as we are chasing things in the world, chasing people, chasing situations, we will not be fulfilled. They will make us happy momentarily, but they cannot make us permanently happy. So we need to keep doing this sadhana as long as we are in the body consciousness. Then once we get there, what is the experience? Na tad bhasayate suryo, na shashanko na pavakah, yad gatva na nivartante, tad dhama paramam mama. So the translation here on my screen says, the sun does not shine there, nor the moon, nor fire, to which having gone, they return not. That is my supreme abode. So this is the literal translation of that verse. Okay. So this is not really what it means. It means that the sun, the moon, natad bhasayate Surya means sun. Na shashanko na pavakaha. Shashanka means moon and pavakaha means Agni. So neither the sun nor the moon nor the Agni is capable of illuminating that. Na tad bhasayate Suryo means that cannot be illuminated by either the sun or the moon or the Agni, because that is self-illumined. Okay, so if we are in our house and at night, if the power goes out, then what do? We turn a match light on, then we turn a candle on, and that candle will show us what is there in the room. It will be the source of light, isn't it? If the moon is there in the night, the moon will show us light. But when the sun comes out, then the candle in our hand cannot make any difference to the sun. The sun cannot be illuminated by the candle, right? So here the teacher is saying that the sun, the moon, or the Agni, they are unable to illumine or illuminate that. Yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. So once we reach that dhama, means that abode, then we won't come back. We will not return to the world of relativity once we understand who we are. So that's why I said, once we get even a glimpse of who we are, then the world of relativity no longer attaches us. Okay, so we will do things in the world, but we will not do them with any kind of asakti or attachment. We will do things which are beneficial for everybody, not just for us individually, because we do not consider ourselves as an individual. Okay? We consider ourselves as a part of the whole. So this is the understanding of all of these verses so far. So I hope the meaning of these verses is clear. And if it is not, then I'm going to ask people to ask me questions and clarify their doubts. So Sudhir, I'm going to stop here for right now. Let us take some questions from people. Whether they have understood or not, let us find out.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
Any hands up so far?
No. One second. Brother Gangas and Tanuj are trying to reach.
All right. So why don't you talk to them and see if they can, this question will arise. But if we look at any situation in its totality, then this question does not arise. Okay, resisting an attacker is done naturally by, so I again see, I like to give an example of our own body, because we understand our bodies better than we understand anything else. In fact, if we understand our body fully and completely, then we understand how this world works also, because it is said in our scriptures that yatha pinde tatha brahmande. So the way our body functions, or the way we experience our body, if we understand this fully, then we can also understand how the world functions. So whenever there is a disease in our body, or a disease causing agent attacks our body, what our body does, our body resists that disease causing agent or kills that disease causing agent by generating an immune response. Our white blood cells will engulf the foreign particle or the foreign body and they will kill it. And then this entire mess will be cleaned up by the body through either the blood, through the kidneys, through our excretory products, right? So that is how this body gets cleaned up. But this body will get cleaned up only if its defense mechanism and if its power of resistance is working properly. If that defense mechanism and the power of resistance is not working properly, then the disease causing agent will establish itself in the body. The reason India was attacked by foreign powers is because India's inherent strength of its own dharma was weakened for many reasons, for different reasons. Right. So, in order to resist any such events, what we need to do is to ensure that our inherent strength is enhanced and maintained by very strict adherence to the dharma. So, when we see such things happening in the world or such things happening to ourselves, we should understand that it is because there is something wrong with us. So therefore, this question is valid, but this question has to be internalized. What do I learn from this incident, or what do I learn from this event? If that event does not transform me, then I have learned nothing from the event. I will only academically keep discussing the event and keep thinking to myself that, oh, this foreign attacker is not good. Of course it is not good, right? But I don't have to succumb to him. Okay, so if we are in a state of me versus the other, until that state of mind continues, these questions will keep popping up in our mind. When we come to a state within ourselves that this entire world is basically permeated by the same principle, Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat yena tyaktena bhunjitha magrudak kasya svidhanam. That is what the Upanishad tells us. Okay, so this entire world is completely permeated by the same principle. We call it Isha, we call it Paramatma, or you can call it Brahman, you can call it, it doesn't matter if you call it Allah or if you call it the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost, it doesn't matter. It's the same principle. But understanding this should change my life from within. That is the purpose of understanding and learning all of these things, right? Otherwise, we will only learn these things academically and we will keep debating on these things. So instead of that, our focus should be on how can I strengthen my own dharma? How can I start following my own swadharma all the time, right? So that is the basic point of this. And your question is completely valid. We must resist any attack on our dharma about that. And this dharma does not mean religion, by the way, okay? The word dharma does not translate into religion. When I say swadharma, I call adherence to the natural law. All right. Sanatan dharma means natural law. Sanatan dharma does not mean anything bad. Sanatan dharma is actually completely secular. It is equally applicable to anybody and everybody, including people who do not believe. Even if you don't believe natural law is still applicable to you. If you believe that you can fly like a bird, and if you jump from the 10th floor of a building, the law of gravity does not understand or does not recognize whether you recognize or you understand the law of gravity or not. It is going to dump you to the ground and kill you. So when I say dharma, dharma means natural law. All right. If we understand natural law and if we live according to it, then our life runs really wonderfully well. If we do not understand natural law, if we go against it, nature does not care. Nature will teach us. All right. It is up to us to learn. All right. I'm going to take the next question. Dr. Dhananjay Dongre, can you please unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question. I'm trying to unmute you. Okay, great. Namaskar. Bola.
Namaskar. But I did not
Please,
want to ask any question as such.
please say your comments. I will be delighted.
Frankly speaking, the talk is going so slow that I am really more interested in knowing the further explanations. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take the next question from Pratap ji.
Yeah, Namaskar. The question I have is that, see, we take birth because of our karma and the desires which is unfulfilled, or good or bad, whatever the desires we had or what experience we need to do based on karma, we take birth. Now, as it is said that we have to elevate ourselves and to come out of the cycle of life and death. We have to eliminate or mitigate the desires and come out of it and remain in a witness state. Then if that is the case, then how can I is it possible to convert my destiny and come to that stage? Because I have born here with the purpose of to fulfill my desires. Is that you got my point? So now we are saying that we should eliminate desire. So is it possible to change?
It is indeed possible to change. And if we truly understand that we are bound to this world because of our desires, see, how do we eliminate an effect? We eliminate an effect if we eliminate the cause. How do we become healthy? If we eliminate the cause of disease, the disease disappears. So our disease is being born again and again because of our desire. So if we eliminate the desire, then we will not be born again and again. If we understand this, the purpose of being born in a human form is to essentially understand this. All right. In any other form, you will not even try to understand this. You will simply continue doing what you are doing. So that is the thing. All right. So I'm going to mute you, Pratap ji. I'm going to talk to Doctor, or you mute. Can you mute yourself? And as suggested by Dr. Dongre, I'm going to talk about a few verses thereafter, because yes, we have only gone up to 6 verses. We have to cover the whole 20 verses, the entire chapter. So let's try to go another 3 or 4 verses. Yes.
Vikramji, before that, so today we gave a very good example saying what is dharma and what is Sanatan dharma. So far we are seeing it as a only religious purpose, or like some kind of spiritual or limited to worshipping all the stuff. But you really gave an example like and as extension to that, can you please elaborate a bit comparing with the model chemical living and natural eco living, so that is more clear and for it can reach many people.
Okay, so actually today's attendance is the lowest we have seen in a long time, right?
Yeah.
Which means what? Last Sunday's discussion was too theoretical. That's why I wanted to make it a bit more practical today, so that people will understand. So how does all of this relate to natural eco-living? See, nature has programmed all living entities to live in a certain manner, except a human being. Human being is free to live in the way the human being wants. All right. Unfortunately, the human being does not understand that he is a part of the nature and behaves in a manner where he wants to enjoy nature, which means he has understood nature as an entertainment device rather than something which is sustaining him. All right. Because of that, we start indulging and we want more and more and more. So our desire knows no limit, no boundaries, and we keep exploiting nature. That is what has happened in the past couple hundred years after industrialization. I might have said this in one of my previous webinars. See, before the steam engine was invented, everything we used to do, whether we would do it at home or as a part of our profession or whatever, any activity would generate no waste that could not be assimilated or converted or transformed by nature. So whatever byproducts or wastes used to be generated because of human activities, those byproducts or wastes would be assimilated by nature and they would be transformed into something else. Some other life form would use them. That is how nature used to work. But after the invention of the steam engine, industrialization happened, which means the people who had equipment would establish industries and they would accumulate a huge amount of wealth. All right. So there was a disparity between people who had a lot and then the people who did not have enough. All right. And to perpetuate that entire economy or system, in the last 200 years or so, we have invented all kinds of economic systems, political systems, military systems to perpetuate that. So nature does not expect us to live in this manner. Okay, nature expects us to live in a manner compatible with nature as well as beneficial to nature, because every organism is beneficial to nature in some way or the other. Every organism is contributing in some way or the other to nature. All right. So if we are not contributing anything to nature and if we are exploiting nature, then nature does not like that. Okay. Many of you might think, how can I say that? Does nature have a mind? Does nature have intelligence? Nature has much more intelligence than you and I and all of us combined, put together. All right. Nature's intelligence is supreme. Nature's intelligence is perfect. Nature's intelligence never fails. Okay. Everything that happens in nature is for the benefit of nature, for the benefit of the whole, not for the benefit of a specific organism. So I've given this example in the past also. How does a lion chase so many deer in a jungle and one deer gets caught? The deer that is the least efficient gets caught. So from that deer's point of view, the outcome is disastrous. But from nature's point of view, nature has eliminated the inefficiency and promoted the efficiency. Right? So in the same manner, even in the human race, see, right now we happen to be in this big corona event. As I said, not everybody is dying and not everybody will die. Only those whose immune response or whose defense mechanism is not stronger than the virus, only they will succumb. The people whose immune response is better, whose defense mechanism within their own body is good, to them, the virus cannot do anything, right? So if we understand nature in this manner, if we understand that we are a part of nature, then we will not engage in any activity that is against nature. We will not produce any material that cannot be assimilated by nature. We will start living naturally. We will start living in an eco-friendly manner. That is the answer to your question, Sudhir. And
so that is we call as a dharma.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
That is the dharma.
Yeah.
That is the reason I even participate in these webinars. Otherwise, I would not participate in the webinars at all. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So shall we go a couple of verses at least? Because I have 10 more minutes. I'm going to go through 3 or 4 verses. I'm going to actually, is Gangadhar able to get his sons on the
no,
webinar?
we are not able to connect.
Not able to connect. That's too bad. Next week we shall see.
Yeah.
I'm going to recite the next 4 verses and then we will take the meaning together. All right. So, Mamai Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha मनःषष्ठानीन्द्रियाणि प्रकृतिस्थानि कर्षति शरीरं यदवाप्नोति यच्चाप्युत्क्रामतीश्वरः गृहीत्वैतानि संयाति वायुर्गन्धानि वाशयात् श्रोत्रं चक्षुः स्पर्शनं च रसनं घ्राणमेव च अधिष्ठाय मनश्चायं विषयानुपसेवते. Ninth verse is disappeared from my presentation for some reason. So anyway, I just said that. After that, utkramantam sthitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanvitam vimudhananupashyanti pashyanti jnana chakshushaha yatanto yoginaschainam yash pashyantyatmanyavasthitam yatantopyakrutatmano nainam pashyantya chetasaha. I have recited 5 verses and I'm going to try to explain the meaning of all these 5 verses in one go. This is where the teacher is telling us what is the jiva, or what we consider as the individual soul. All right, so the first verse says, which is the 7th verse in the chapter, Mamai vansho jivaloke jiva bhuta sanatanaha. Mama eva ansha means my, only my ansha means fragment or fraction. Jiva loke, in this material world, jiva bhuta means appears as a living soul or a jiva, sanatana or eternally. All right, so the way this verse is normally understood is that every jiva or every living entity is a fraction or an embodiment of Paramatma or the eternal principle. All right. Now think of this as space. All right. Imagine the space within our house and outside of our house. How did we imagine inside and outside? This inside and outside was imagined because of the walls, which we ourselves created. Okay. So the inside and outside is only imagined in the space. The space within and the space outside are not different spaces. They are the same space, only because of a boundary which we have ourselves created. The outside space became different from the inside space. In the same manner, the Paramatma or the eternal spirit, or in this case you may say Krishna consciousness became apparent in the Jiva consciousness. All right. So he says, Mamayeva Ansho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. So the eternal spirit is manifested in the individual entity, not as a fragment, but completely. All right. The properties of the space within us are exactly the same as the properties of the space outside of us. Is there any difference to the space? There is no difference to the space. So in the same manner, what we call the jiva is an imagined entity. All right, it is merely a reflection. So think of it in this manner. If we have 100 different containers of water, just say bowls of water. If we keep those bowls of water in the sun outside, there will be 100 different reflections of the sun in 100 different bowls. Does that mean that the sun became 100? Does that mean that those 100 reflections are real? No, they do appear to be different. They do appear to be real, but they are not real. So that is what Mamai Vansho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana means to me. Okay. Now, as I said in the disclaimer in the beginning, in the last webinar, you do not have to agree with me. You do not have to believe what I believe. I would say you should not believe anything. I do not believe anything either. Okay. I try to understand. I try to seek the truth. In my experience, the divine principle cannot be divided. Okay. It is indivisible. How are you going to divide infinity? Infinity divided by anything is infinity. Infinity cannot be divided. Therefore, us imagining as individuals apart from the total is an illusion, is a mistake. As long as we keep imagining ourselves to be apart from the other, as long as we keep imagining ourselves to be different from the totality, we are living in a fool's paradise. That's exactly how I understand this. Okay. So I have got 3 more minutes before I have to leave here. So I'm going to take one more question from somebody who wants to ask a question. We will continue this next time. So anybody who has a burning question within their heart, please raise your hand. We will unmute you and you can go ahead and I'll answer that in the next 2 minutes.
I think
No
waiting for any
questions.
question. Yeah, but I have
Either, yeah, in the chat there is a question.
no.
No. All right. So therefore, I'm going to do one more verse before we go to the, before I close this.
Maybe I have one question. Like
Go ahead.
in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says there are many types of yoga, like Bhakti Yoga, Gnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and all that stuff. And he finally mentions about Raja Yoga. Maybe can you please elaborate about more about the types of yogas and like which guru is promoting which kind of yoga? That kind of information will be helpful.
All right. I will give you the yoga answer next time, but I'll tell you what the guru is. All right. The guru is our own desire to learn. That desire to learn from within us will manifest itself in a guru outside of us. All right. So when we are in 2nd grade in school, what do? We learn whatever the guru of the 2nd grade is teaching us. We pass our exam, and once we are ready and we want to learn the subsequent curriculum, then the guru for the 3rd standard appears in our life. The guru for the 3rd standard will not appear in our life unless we have passed the exam of the 2nd standard. All right. So we ourselves had a desire to study the curriculum of the 2nd grade. Then we studied that successfully. We understood it. We have internalized it. Then the 3rd standard teacher has appeared in my life. So whichever teacher is appropriate for us, depending upon our level of understanding, will appear in our life. And if we are not ready for a specific type of instruction, even if that guru appears in our life, that guru is not of much help. So if I happen to be only in 2nd or 3rd standard and suddenly somebody who is teaching college appears in my life, it will be totally useless for me and for him as well. So it is better that guru doesn't waste his time and I don't waste my time. I learn from the guru who is appropriate for my level at my stage in life. So let's stop at this point and we will pick it up next Sunday. So thank you for those who attended today. Tell your friends who did not come, and we should prepare a note, Sudhir, saying that this discussion, which was very theoretical last time, is not going to remain theoretical. It's going to remain interactive. It's going to contain a lot of practical examples. I will stop after each verse and I will ask questions, or I will let you ask questions so that we can discuss and we can understand this. We have to internalize this 15th chapter. Otherwise, fulfillment in life does not happen. Okay. So let's do that. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you all. With this, today we'll conclude today's webinar. And looks like today Zoom has a technical issue and we couldn't get a clear voice for some time in the beginning. Yeah. Thank you all. We'll meet in the next Sunday.